cell phone device that could potentially get SJS. So that is my story.
Will you come speak again?
Oh, okay, that was on YouTube, by the way.
I did that on purpose.
Like, actually,
No one's watching. Nobody has a thing, so don't feel bad.
so are you recording this?
It's gonna be recorded automatically, so.
So you're recording this?
Huh? Yeah, kind of.
No, right now, as we speak.
Yeah, we're live. And it's gonna probably be on the YouTube channel.
Please like cut out the phone.
I'll cut it out.
Yeah.
Probably.
I can do some ASMR.
No, it's on the top section.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello, hello. Testing, 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 testing. Thank you, Esther.
Is there any way I can make this easier for you in terms of phrasing? The main presentation, but it's the speaker's presentation.
This speaker, which is online.
Do you want me to download the because once we had one, okay, so this is the camera one, and the two ones we have.
Yeah, just put like a point there, please.
Let me give it to you, please.
I mean, if you want to use it again, you can.
I know how to use it.
Yeah, just check this out. I want to show you something cool. I wonder if it can pick up me talking. It can literally fit me talking. That's fine. Let me just go
Hello?
to this one. So
Hello?
basically, anything,
Wrong one.
child nudity, boom, you just plug in.
Why would there be child nudity?
Oh, you can do clear presentation.
Okay, cool.
Where's the mic?
Right there.
Hello. go. Oh, ready to go.
Cool. Yeah, proceed.
No.
Now what breath sound is that? Please tell me. Sure, not from here. Maybe it's a wheeze. Sleepy drive. Ah, hello, Queen. I've been on it. I took this for you with my page.
Look me, I'm percussing Mike.
Hello. How did she walks past us?
I know, yeah, okay.
Right past us. Like, we don't even aren't a part of that consideration anymore. I think just walk right past us, straight to him to give him a hug.
Because she can find me. Doing some registration, and you should be free to talk to her
ability, safeguarding the best interests of our patients, and advocating for those who may go unheard. To put it simply, our duty is not to only treat illnesses, but to protect the vulnerable. Now, children often find themselves at a crossroad of clinical, legal, and social challenges. Cases of abuse, neglect, consent, confidentiality, and child welfare frequently require us as healthcare professionals to navigate difficult decisions that extend far beyond the boundaries of medicine alone. It's in these moments where effective child protection depends not only on one profession acting in isolation, but on a collaboration between healthcare workers, social workers, legal professionals, and educators all alike. Now, pediatrics has always been more than caring for children when they're sick. It's about promoting their well-being, protecting their rights, and creating environments in which they not only survive, but can thrive. Yet despite this importance, many healthcare students feel underprepared to recognize and respond to situations where child safety might be at risk, and today's event aims to bridge that gap. So by the end of today, we really hope you'll leave with a deeper appreciation for the challenges of the vulnerable children, a greater confidence in recognizing and responding to child protection concerns, and a stronger understanding of the role that each of us play in advocating for children's rights and well-being. So thank you for joining us this evening, and we're delighted to have you here, and we hope that today's discussion will challenge, inspire, and empower you. Welcome to the Child at the Crossroads. Thank you.
Our first speaker, Dr. Shahida Omar, is a renowned social justice activist, published author, and one of South Africa's leading advocates for child's rights. She currently serves as the clinical director of the Teddy Bear Foundation, a multidisciplinary organization dedicated to the prevention and treatment of child abuse, as well as the protection and support of vulnerable children and their families. With almost 3 decades of experience in the field of child protection, Dr. Omar has held leadership roles including clinical director, clinical coordinator, and therapeutic coordinator. She holds a PhD in social work from the University of Johannesburg and has contributed extensively to national child protection initiatives through her work on multi-sectoral boards, national committees, and task teams. Through her clinical, academic, and advocacy work, she has played a significant role in shaping child protection practice in South Africa. We are honored to welcome Dr. Omar today to share her expertise and insights on safeguarding children and advancing children's rights in South Africa. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Omar.
Universal greetings to one and all. I think, just a reflection of my age. It's actually more than 3 decades, nearly 4 decades in child protection, and 26 years at the Teddy Bear Foundation. And the Teddy Bear Foundation is a brand name on child rights, activism, protection of children, and working on prevention. Prevention is key because we know child protection is not only a national priority, it's an international priority. We have been on many international platforms as well. We've presented on international platforms across Europe, across the States, and even in South America, where we went to the Ending Violence Against Children First Ministerial Conference. So for those of you that may or may not be aware of the Teddy Bear Foundation, it started off purely as a medical legal clinic where there was a gap identified that at the time there were what we called the district surgeons that conducted the forensic medical examinations of violations of abuse, domestic violence, child abuse, and the kind of examinations were adult orientated, adult tailored. It was not specific for children. Our late Professor Lorna Jacqueline, who was the founding member of the foundation and of the medical clinic, started the medical clinic, which was formerly known as the Transvaal Memorial Institute, where a lot of the interns and registrars did their circulation through the Teddy Bear Clinic and other medical resources within that Center. It's now known as the Children's Memorial Institute, which is on the corner of Empire Road. And I'm sure you all know the facility because there's over 34 NGOs, civil society organizations providing services and support to children. So I'm going to be focusing on our holistic model. You will see that we work within the multidisciplinary sector, and it's an integrated approach to child abuse. I think we need to understand that children are the most vulnerable population group, and of course most marginalized. They are powerless, defenseless, and not in a position to stop what is happening to them. And although they should be protected at all times, unfortunately that is not the reality. And what we need to understand and appreciate and recognize, I'm going to ask each one of you, look around and show me or identify who is a sexual predator, who is a child abuser. Are there any typical characteristics, or is there a typical profile that you can identify? Look around you. It's the nicest amongst us. I want to just reassure you. It's your nice maths teacher, your sports coach, your rabbi, your imam, your favorite life orientation teacher. It could be an uncle, a grandparent, even a parent. And how do we engage with children to say, you need to be aware of all these risks that anyone, but anyone, can abuse you or violate you. That is it's the hardest thing that I've experienced throughout the 3 decades and I would say nearly 4 decades that I've worked with. How do you instill panic, fear, and so to the child? Yes, there is the stranger danger scenario, but the stranger danger is not the trend or the pattern that we are seeing. It's more often within the home, within the school, within a setting where children are supposed to be secure and safe. So I think we just need to look at the context and purpose here, the child rights framework, and the intersections between clinical care, which is where you people come from, legal protection, and social justice. And we at the Teddy Bear Foundation, we look at supporting child victims, but not just the child alone, because a child doesn't exist in isolation. The child is nested in systems, whether it's a family, whether it's a residential care facility, foster care, or any other institution that the child may be in, a temporary emergency placement with in a safe house, if the child has been removed from the care of his or her biological parents or legal guardians. So, looking from the child rights framework, and of course, the Children's Act speaks to promoting the best interest of the child. It's always looking at what is in the best interest of the child. The Children's Act supersedes any other act when it comes to children. And the important thing is that even if we look at the Constitution, Section 28 of the Constitution speaks to the right to education, the right to protection, the right to health care, and we can continue with that in terms of rights. But we also have to look at the one thing I always say is that we need to go back to grassroots, and we need to amplify children's voices. So what we mean by that is nothing about us without us. It's not this top-down blueprint policy and legislation. We need to hear from the mouths of children themselves. What is hurting, what is working, what is not working, what would they like to see? And if we just cast our minds to 20 years ago, children had no voices. In fact, when they made disclosures, they were not even believed. Their evidence was viewed with caution. And unfortunately, that allowed a lot of perpetrators to continue violating children and perpetuating the cycle of abuse, whether it was physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, purposeful neglect, because we know there's situational neglect and purposeful neglect. where there's intention to harm or ignore and not attend to the child's basic needs, attend to the rights of the child. So we need to be clear on that. And 20 years ago, children, unfortunately, when they testified also, the evidence, there was this lack of belief in the evidence when the late disclosures of cases were opened, and even when it was presented in court and they had to testify. But we'll hear more about our court preparation program, how it emerged, and the results of that. So looking at children's rights framework, we needed to look at the holistic well-being of the child, not just physically, emotionally, but it's a holistic approach to protection and safety. The teddy bear model, I think here, as I mentioned, it's an integrated, holistic, and comprehensive service model. So we got three frameworks. It's not just a holistic well-being of the child, not just physically, emotionally, but it's a holistic approach to protection and safety. The teddy bear model, I think here, as I mentioned, there she's our medical officer. She's in charge of the medical clinic. And so there's the medical aspect, so it's medical legal. So with medical, the medical examinations happen there, and if it's not within Gauteng or if it's not within the Johannesburg region, we work with the Tutuzela Care Centers, which falls under the ambit of the National Prosecutions Authority. And the Tutuzela Care Centers are a one-stop shop facility where there's medical professionals, there's your investigating officers, the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences Unit. There would be social workers, there would be the first responders and other interventionists that would provide support. So that's the Tutuzela Care Centers. And there are other medical legal clinics like the Hillbrow Medical Legal, and then in the East Rand and in Midrand and across Gauteng province and other provinces. But the Teddy Bear Clinic is one of the specialized clinics that works specifically with victims of child abuse. So it's an expertise that is, it's a very specialized service. Unfortunately, it's a flagship clinic, but it's not rolled into other provinces or other regions. And then, so that's the medical side, and the legal is the actual court preparation. And I know the request was made that we need to speak to court preparation, which I will speak to shortly. But court preparation is provided once a criminal case has been opened. So once a criminal case has been opened, a statement is taken from the child, and then an investigation is to be followed. So as part of the investigation, there might be a referral for a medical examination to complete a J88 form, where the medical doctor would then examine the child head to toe and complete the J88, and then a law enforcement official from SATS would come in, and that is a signed and sealed document, which then goes to the prosecutor, the National Prosecutions Authority. They would look at it, and the medical report would either say there are conclusive findings, it's compatible with the disclosure made by the child, or the findings are inconclusive. However, I think doctors, the rule of thumb these days are that they err on the side of caution, because we know that in many cases, to 80 to 90% of cases, there isn't conclusive medical evidence. Even if there's been anal penetration or vaginal penetration, because of the stage of tenor, if the child is estrogenized and the hymen is thick, penetration can occur without rupturing the hymen, and there are many other reasons. I won't go into that. But just to cover themselves, doctors say often put on the report that although there aren't any conclusive findings, this does not preclude or exclude that sexual abuse has not occurred. So you'll see that we also conduct forensic assessments. Besides the forensic medical examination, forensic assessments are conducted by psychologists and social workers that are specially trained in this field. They utilize methods and specific tools to ascertain the veracity and credibility of the child, to see if there's consistency in the child's disclosures, with using age-appropriate techniques, whether it be drawings and incomplete sentences, all sorts of different approaches to ensure that the child is consistent and what the child is sharing, there's validity and there's reliability, and that information will be provided in a form of a report where the court would then subpoena the evaluator to testify in court. And that has certainly helped a lot, because with medical examinations, as we know, the findings are not conclusive, but sometimes, and the child will consistently say, but this happened, and it was, a knife was put inside, or they will describe the actual sexual assault or violation, and yet there's no evidence to support it. And that, with a forensic assessment, it helps, because 20 years ago the conviction rate was 0. But if we look at the conviction rates now, we are finding life sentences, double life sentences, and there are convictions, people are being sentenced, people are being held accountable and brought to book. So, there has been a positive shift, where previously children were not believed, and now children are believed and children are given supportive, and the standard protocol is that they need to go through a court preparation program. I'll speak to that shortly. So if we look at our approach, so medical, legal, and then psychosocial support. So psychosocial support is a whole spectrum of therapeutic interventions with little children as young as 2.5 and older. We would use play therapy. So what is play therapy? Is it just the informal play? It's not informal play, but it's not threatening. It's also connecting with the child, because how do children communicate? Play is a natural medium of communication. They express themselves. The words that are articulated is in their play, and they use the toys as their words, and the actual play is, of course, that they reenact any ill or perceived hurt, any trauma. We find that they would display specific behaviors, dominant themes would emerge through that process. So just for you to understand that that is the approach. So play therapy, but we have witness to violence interviews with children who have witnessed violence, parents being shot to death or bludgeoned to death, or they've seen horrific things, they've witnessed that. So witness to violence interviews, the debriefs that we continue with, supportive counseling to family members, because often we find that yes, children are traumatized, but the adults who have a deeper understanding and insight into the complexities of the trauma become even more traumatized, and that could impact on the healing process of the child, because their anxieties then filter down to the child. And I think that is something that is critical, that we do not work in isolation. We have to contain the container in order to make sure that there's holistic healing. So the other programs that we provide as part of psychosocial interventions, I just want to do, so we've got a lot of work that is being done now is with gender-based violence. So a lot of outreach, and as part of the gender-based violence, we also have our school outreach programs, the SAFE programs, where we speak to children around their rights and responsibilities, bodily autonomy, and understanding the difference between acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, safe and unsafe touches, good and bad secrets. We do not speak to good and bad touches. The bad touches can feel good because our erogenous zones are organized in such a way that if children rub their body parts, they actually feel good about it, and we don't want to instill a sense of guilt, because we work with adult survivors, and sex and sexuality is projected and portrayed as something that is not always, but we know from in many homes as something we don't talk about. It's a taboo subject. It's frowned upon. So we don't want to instill guilt. And with our adult survivors, we found that there was barriers to intimacy. where when a person grew up in a very rigid family and dogmatic and very religious background, where they were not exposed or allowed to engage in any discussion around sex and sexuality. There were guilt feelings when they were in an intimate relationship, so the fear of that kind of connection as well. So we speak to and go, not good and bad touches, but good and bad secrets, like a surprise birthday, a surprise gift. Those are good secrets to keep. And of course the bad secrets are when people coerce you into touching you and making you feel uncomfortable. And with children we use age-appropriate language. We also use puppets. We've got an animated video that we've also created, and we play that to children. So different age groups, different approaches. We speak to older children about the harmful effects of the internet, that it's a paradise for learning, but also the risks are also great. There's benefits, but there's risks. The risk of being recruited by pedophiles that are waiting online, traffickers that are waiting online. We've seen cases like that where trafficking doesn't mean that you actually leave the province or the country, or that you're going to cross borders. Children are trafficked. Like in the East Rand, we had 20 young girls where we got a report. These girls were taken every night into a big vehicle, transported, and would return early hours of the morning. That was transactional sex, but there were traffickers involved. So those are the kinds of things that we alert children to. And the transactional sex as well. Because often, because of poverty and unemployment, we're not judgmental. We need to appreciate and recognize the landscape of South Africa. And it's about meeting basic needs, food and shelter, the hierarchy of needs. We look at Maslow's need, the hierarchy of needs, where children will actually engage in transactional sex to provide bread on the table, school fees, uniforms, rent. Those are the realities that many of our children are faced with. So just for you to understand. And then I want to also say that that's part of the SEC outreach, but then we also have a program for child pregnant learners. Now, we know that if you look at the stats of the past year, SA stats, 117,000 children, girls, between the ages of 10 and 14 were pregnant. Now remember, these are reported cases. These are the cases that have come to the attention of the authorities. They are not, it's an estimate of what's actually happening on the ground. So we have embarked on support groups across Gauteng province. Just past COVID, we started with child pregnant learners. The one school approached us, and in Orange Farm, they had 20 learners at one go in that same month that reported being pregnant. And then we went in to assist, to provide psychosocial support, but not only psychosocial support, to ensure that these learners do not drop out of school, that that they're not denied of the opportunities of a career, of future growth, and also linking them with the child support grant, with health care, because we know that maternal health care post natal not denied the opportunities of a career, of future growth, and also linking them with the child support grant, with health care, because we know that maternal health care post from ECD facilities, where a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old have attempted penetration and penetration, full-blown penetration. And if we look at the statistics, we've done comprehensive studies that just under 50% of sexual assaults that are committed by children against other children. And it's orchestrated behind closed doors, so they're aware of the fact that it's not appropriate, it's not acceptable, and it's usually, and they use, the modus operandi is using social reinforcers, whether it's bribery, tokens, even threats and intimidation, children threatening other children. And it's between siblings, cousins, friends, the dynamic of power. It may be age mates, but the one person may be in a stronger position than the other, overruling or overriding that person. So I just think you need to understand that we run a diversion program, and in the diversion program, it's not about criminalizing or pathologizing, because a lot of these children come from backgrounds of adversity, where there's a history of victimization, physical abuse, sexual abuse themselves, substance abuse, single parent households, poverty, overcrowding, and other challenges that these children have been faced with. So the idea is to divert them away from the criminal justice system, to give them a second chance in life. So it falls under the Child Justice Act. Previously, children were just lumped in with adults and were incarcerated with adults, and found what government found that they became more hardened criminals, and the aim has been to ensure that instead of doing that, it was more harmful than helpful. So to change that, the shift has been that we create a program that would be more healing. So if we look at our court prep program, I think I'm going to focus a lot more on that, but I just want to share with you the counseling, the crisis intervention, debriefing, witness to violence interviews, and then forensic assessments I spoke to you about, the SPARK program, which is the diversion program, support program for young sex offenders. So sometimes it's referred by courts, sometimes it's referred by schools and other NGOs and non-government organizations and any other institution. But the court-mandated ones, a court report is required, where we have to ensure that the child shows favorable progress in prognosis, and that the child is not at risk of reoffending. Then psychological testing, we also conduct mental age assessments. We work with a lot of disabilities, the whole spectrum of disabilities, and mental age assessments also. To assist the court, what does the mental age assessment provide? It assists the court in understanding if the child can respond to certain questions in the court, or the level of functioning, the level of understanding. So that is what the psychological testing is about, the mental age assessment report, which is also provided to the court. The psychologist would be subpoenaed to testify in court on the basis of the findings of that report. I've already spoken about the school outreach, but we workshop with learners, but we also workshop with educators. As I said, our approach is always holistic. So educating the educator on identifying the signs and symptoms of abuse, the management thereof, the referral pathways, where they can refer, and the legislation. Because Section 110 of the Children's Act speaks to the fact that certain individuals are compelled to report, and failure to report it constitutes a criminal offense. So making people aware that they have to report if there's any doubt, suspicion, or inkling of abuse, then one is expected to report it. It's a legal obligation, not a moral obligation. The Boys and Girls SRHR Club, so that falls under gender-based violence as well. In these sessions, we engage both the girl child and the boy child together, and addressing their sexual abuse, rights and responsibilities, consent issues. What does yes mean? What does no mean? And what do people understand in a relationship if the person decides at the last minute that they don't want to continue with sexual intimacy? Does that individual have a right? And the other party, should they respect that or not? So we engage them, analyzing values and attitudes around that as well. And that also, as I said, falls under gender-based violence. Then we do research, ongoing research, evaluating our interventions, because we feel it's important for us to keep abreast with whether our interventions are relevant or not, and that the interventions must inform the relevance of the programs that we are delivering. So on an annual basis, during the 16 days of activism, the first week in December, we always go online and present all our research papers. We usually present 5 to 6 research papers annually, which is published in journals as well. Then gender-based violence, we go out into the communities, whether it's informal settlements, taxi ranks, recreational facilities, old age homes, but anywhere, any public space. And we partner with other organizations. We also partner with SAPS. We speak about protection orders, interim protection orders, and how people can access them, make them aware of shelters or resources that are available, helplines, toll-free helplines, 24-hour helplines, the national shelter movement where they can access support if they need to. We've spoken about the child pregnant learners, and I think, just to show that forensic and therapeutic responses to abuse, as you can see, trauma-informed and child-centered practice, the multidisciplinary approach, and I think what I want to just focus quickly now is on advocacy in action. So here, I want to speak to the fact that as the Teddy Bear Foundation, we've always been front runners in ensuring that children's rights are upheld. Whenever there's been a violation of children's rights, we've taken the matter further. Where if you look at the Sexual Offences Act sections 15 and 16, where we went to the Constitutional Court, the highest court in the land, and at that time, when children were caught kissing, so embracing, in any form of intimacy, petting or necking, it would be expected that if an educator, a parent, anyone that saw the child or witnessed this, they were obliged to report this. That was the regulation. It was mandatory that they report it. And unfortunately, what happened was, instead of that piece of legislation being helpful, it was harmful. What actually happened was that children refused to go to your healthcare facilities, seeking contraception, guidance, advice, and even with regard to termination of pregnancy, they went for backstreet abortions, cases of septicemia, the mortality rates increased incidence of HIV because children were now afraid of being reported, because once they were reported, they entered the criminal justice system, which meant that they would have to go through police interrogation, appear in court, and if they found guilty, they would be charged and detained. So those were the implications of the Wits 15, sections 15 and 16. And so when we made the application to the court to decriminalize this, and we were successful in that because the courts agreed it was subjecting the children to secondary victimization, further trauma. Then if you look at the Franco case as well, and here I think just to understand that these were children when they were at Arcadia Children's Home, they were violated, sexually violated by the philanthropist who actually funded that home. And when they were young and made a disclosure, nobody believed them, and the first responder said to them, "Don't ever speak like that of Sidney Franco. He's the most generous, giving soul under the sun." So as children, they just stopped and recanted. However, 3 decades later, they found they didn't get closure. They were still so deeply wounded. The psychological scars remain. The physical wounds may disappear, but the psychological scars remain. And then they decided, they sought advice, legal advice, and at that time they couldn't open a criminal case because the statute of limitations had already lapsed. And so they had to, then they were advised to go through the civil route, the civil suit. So, but I just want to say that what actually happened as a result of that was that amended relief was provided to the statute of limitations, which means to children and adults. So now there's no statute of limitation years after the fact, because at that time it was 20 years, only 20 years. Now 50 years after also, or 30 years after, or 40 years. In fact, there's a case at the moment now, the South African Jewish Board of Educators, and they have to be commended for this. Two men who are in their 50s now have made a disclosure, have opened a case. They are out of the country, one in Canada, one in the UK, and they were sexually abused, repeatedly raped in the hostel where they stayed at the it was King David School. It's public knowledge, so I'm allowed to speak to that. I wouldn't speak if it's sub judice or it's a confidential case. And they've come forward, and it appears like there are other victims that are also coming forward. So now you can see that so many years after, because of the amended relief on statute of limitations, people can come forward and they can still be given an opportunity. So it's, we know that justice delayed is justice denied, but if that justice is pursued and they're allowed the processes of taking it further, I think that gives people a sense of closure, a sense of power and control in their lives. Corporal punishment, the same thing. I just wanted to show you that how we were amicus curiae also in the Concord, where we took it further and it was abolished. And we know that at home as well. So schools a long time ago, but it was still in practice, but even at home, we cannot use the argument of reasonable chastisement. I just tapped him on his shoulder, I just gave him a shot on his bum, or just a touch on the cheek. That's not acceptable. Of course, we've had lots of parents contesting that and raising concerns and being quite angry to say, but so if I've just touched my child or just given one shot, I'm in isolation, that doesn't mean that the parent is going to be arrested. And I think we have to look at things in context as well, but also look at how best can we support their parent. And if you look at the intervention programs that are being provided now, more parenting programs, positive parenting, a lot of emphasis on positive parenting, because of the lack of communication between parent and child in many homes, in the best of homes. We're not judging anybody, but as equipping, empowering, and enhancing that level of engagement and dialogue between parents and children. Then during COVID, we were also quite active in that, where we were reaching out to children. It was, I don't know if you remember, but maybe you were much younger then. I remember in masks and going into the informal settlements, freezing, because people were not working, no work, no pay, no food, and children that were going to school had access to food, but schools were shut down. So no school, no food. And we took it also to the High Court. We submitted affidavits. We submitted a case study where from one family we found the 11-year-old, 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and they were scraping the bottom of the barrels of the gas-bins, running to the neighbors. People didn't have anything to offer. The mother had gone to another province, her brother had passed on, but because of the lockdown, she wasn't allowed to return. And these children were left, so it wasn't purposeful neglect, it was situational neglect, and then no schools and no food. And we took this case study, we submitted affidavits, and immediately the feeding scheme was reinstated, where schools had to provide food to the children regardless of that schools were not open. So just to show you that we're always advocating on behalf of children, and then the National Sex Offender Registration. We also submitted a case where we actually submitted an application to the Department of Justice, Department of Social Development, Education, the South African College of Educators, because I want to bring this to your attention. A lot of people are not screened and vetted on Part B of the Child Protection Register. So what is Part B? Anybody that is found to be unsuitable to work with children, the National Sex Offender Register. If they have been found guilty, they would be convicted and a sentence would be of course meted out to the individual. But many of the cases are not on the sex offender register. Many of the educators are not vetted, and they continue to perpetuate the cycle of abuse, because what happens? They get a whiff that they are being investigated, or there's a disciplinary, there's inquiry into their conduct. They disappear, only to surface at another school and continue perpetuating the cycle of abuse. So we have taken people to task. Department of Education said they're willing to settle with us and of course work on that. Justice has not come back, but we'll be still fighting that battle. Okay, so you can just see that this is the kind of approach we adopt, and you can see the social justice lens. Then we come to court preparation. Now, very important, this program started in 1997 in response to the fact that children's evidence was viewed with caution. They were not considered reliable witnesses. So as a result, children are often single witnesses. They don't have corroborating evidence, because when they violate it, it's behind closed doors, and that's the perpetrator's modus operandi. So in response to that, the Televiv clinic at the time, Professor Lorna Chapman went to New Zealand and Australia, and they picked up a few ideas around court preparation, and it was then introduced and implemented. If you have an opportunity of time, you're welcome to come to our offices here in Parktown. We have a proper mock courtroom, identical to a real court. And our other satellite offices in Soweto, Joburg, Boysons, Palm Ridge, we use the real courtrooms for court preparation. When we take the children into the courtroom to role play with them, to identify the role players, who's who in the zoo, and to allay their fears and anxieties. I don't know, how many of you have been to court? A show of hands. And? Was it a lovely experience, warm, heartwarming? Well, I must tell you, more than 3 decades in the field and going in as an expert witness, I still don't feel comfortable going into a courtroom. I feel quite anxious. It's a daunting experience. Courtrooms are not built for children, not built for humans. And it's not user-friendly, it's not child-friendly. So basically, the whole aim of court preparation is to allay those fears and to empower a child to understand that he or she has rights. So what do? We don't teach them what to say, we don't coach them, because if we tell them what to say in court, it's inadmissible and the whole case will be thrown out of court. It's coaching a child, which is definitely not allowed. So we basically just teach the child to understand the difference between a truth and a lie. So say for young children we would use different colors, but if a child is colorblind, you cannot use colors as well. Blue and red if they're colorblind. But showing them objects, if I say this is a chair, am I telling a truth? And so I'll point to objects. I'll say this is a chair, using a table. Is that a truth or is that a lie? So getting a child to understand and make that distinction between truth and lies. And that is what we teach the child, to speak the truth, whatever it is. But making them understand that they have rights if they don't understand, if they don't know, if they can't remember. It's okay to say, I can't remember, I don't know. So taking them and role-playing and rehearsing that repeatedly with children. But we have parallel programs, so the children are again separated into groups according to their ages. So, categorized and classified into age groups, and parents have a support group where a panel of experts, psychologist, social worker, lawyer, police officer, where an intermediary, and parents' questions are answered, because I think if we look at the challenges that they face, we had a march on Sunday, as this is Child Protection Month, we had a march to the Constitutional Court where children made pledges and submitted a memorandum to the Chief Justice and to the MEC, and of course it's going to go to the Minister of Justice, where they spoke specifically to their challenges, again amplifying children's voices, where they said they need safe spaces, they need their cases to be fast-tracked, because I was talking to somebody yesterday and they said their case took 7 years to be finalized. Now just think that if you're 5 years old, 7 years old, and another 7 years, think of the trauma, the prolonged trauma, that medical model of each time you're opening that wound, you prepare yourself, you treat that wound, you go into court only to be told, sorry, we're postponing today because the magistrate had to recuse himself or herself, or the defense has changed their lawyer, or the accused is ill, or the investigation is still underway, but it can continue like that for years. So these are the resolutions that children made to government to say that they need to address these challenges, the lack of intermediaries, the lack of interpreters, the lack of signers of signing language for persons with hearing deficits, speech impediments, all those kind of resources. And you know, one might think, it can't be that serious. It's very serious. If we look at 1 in 3 persons or children with disabilities are victims of sexual abuse. So we just need to take that into consideration. You know, and I think here just to also clarify to children, because they have different perceptions of the role players in the courtroom. A survey was conducted, and when children were asked, so what does the prosecutor do? The chances it's the person who chops off your head. So we actually take children into the courtroom. We do role plays where they wear uniform of the role players, actual personnel, but we also have a program as part of the court preparation program. I mean, this is just summarizing what I've said already. I'm going to go quickly to the canine therapy now. So basically, it's that, you know, the children feel protected, they understand the legal system, the families understand the process. Because often the questions that are asked is, how can the alleged perpetrator, remember innocent until proven guilty, how can the perpetrator be released or awarded bail when my daughter or my son was raped? Or they were not informed that the alleged perpetrator was out on bail. They see the perpetrator because they live in the same neighborhood, in the same building, in the same house sometimes because they're sharing rooms in the same home. I think these are things that we just want to make you aware of. So the Drop Dogs program here, this is therapy dogs, and we started with this program in 20. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, perfect. We started this program in 2015 when the dog handlers approached us, Top Dogs approached us, and we thought, you know, my colleagues were a bit skeptical. I said, we have nothing to lose, let's give it a try. And then we brought the dogs in. And the when some of the children were brave enough to go and stroke the dog, and the other children would see the responses, we visited other children, and we've done some statistics. We've actually, like over a 6-month period, photographed images of children coming crying and steer clear of the dog, far away, and over months you see them closer, and then they're touching, stroking, feeding, walking the dog. But I want to say this method was nice. So the important thing to understand is when you stroke a furry object, it reduces the cortisol levels. So the stress hormones come down and the cortisol levels come down. And it also enhances the happy hormones, the release of the endorphins and the serotonin levels. So how does this help the fourth regulation process? It makes the children feel more relaxed, more calm. It enhances their self-esteem and they become more confident in their testimonies. And we like this stuff, so it's something that is solid and tangible evidence to support the relevance of this kind of intervention. Because by stroking, it's also the oxytocin, the love hormone, that bonding some of you have facts. So I want to also just inform you that every child that comes to the Teddy Bear Foundation receives a teddy bear. It's a transitional object. Remember, abuse as an active connotation. They come in not as willing, voluntary. They come in as captive clients, and some will come in, they don't want to be associated with or dissociate, present, limit. So we even stop
join me in welcoming Professor
Good day. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. I can't seem to hear anything on my end. So I don't know if we have it done or not. And then I'm just having difficulties with actually sharing my screen. So let me just figure that out quickly. I can't seem to move the slide to the next slide.
I thought I would see a name. We'll have the slides from outside. No worries.
Thank you so much, Carl. Are you able to share my slides, please? I'll just tell you when to go to the next slide. Okay, I can't see your, I'm sorry, I can't see the slides that you shared from my side. Perhaps you can share your screen on the Google Meet and then I'll be able to see it as direct to you. There we go. Okay. So sorry about the technical difficulties, but good evening everyone. I'm Professor Whitney Rosenberg. I am an Associate Professor at the University of Johannesburg. I am teaching the law of persons and family. I specialize in infant abandonment and I'm also the co-founder and president of Baby Savers South Africa. I'm sure some of you have heard of Baby Savers. I will be discussing that mostly in my presentation. But first I'd like to lay a little bit of a foundation with you this evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak. And although I can't see you, I'm very honored to be here and to be able to present to you this evening. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So before I start with the Baby Savers issue, I just thought it would be good to lay the foundation of which laws govern the health industry and how these relate to the Baby Savers issue. So I just briefly dealt with this in a few slides, the legal and ethical dimensions. First and foremost, South Africa has a constitutional foundation, and we've got a supreme legal framework, meaning all of our laws, conduct, regulations have to adhere to the Constitution. And the right to health care is found right up there at Section 27 in our Bill of Rights. Everyone has the right of access to healthcare services, including reproductive, maternal health care, and then also children's rights, Section 28, which is what we've quoted many times in our court matter, which I'll discuss later. And we use the child's best interest. But really, the Section 28 rights of children also encompass the right to basic health care services, preventive care, treatment and rehabilitation. And both of these rights, the right to health care, Section 27, and children's rights really are undergirded by the right to dignity, equality and life. So Section 9, 10 and 11 of our Bill of Rights. They underpin maternal care but also child care. The legal significance is that it establishes a state duty. So what the Constitution does is it gives the state a duty that they must fulfill. And it anchors Thank you. Then the Choice on Termination of Pregnancy Act, which legalizes abortion and ensures safe reproductive health care access. This supports women's autonomy and reproductive rights. And also, again, one of the arguments was that sections that particularly the reproductive rights of women, when we are talking about abortion, a minor can request an abortion, but a minor cannot request to give her child up to adoption without the consent of the parents and guardian. So this is also one of those ethical issues, the rights of minors, actually what access do they have to make certain decisions autonomously. And then labor and social legislation, which deals with things like our Labor Relations Act and Women's Equity Act and so on. You can go to the next slide. So maternal health rights include access to skilled healthcare professionals, the availability of necessary medical facilities and interventions, informed consent and autonomy over medical decisions, privacy and confidentiality, freedom from discrimination and abuse, and the right to respectful and dignified care. Despite these legal protections that the various pieces of legislation offer, some women face barriers. And here's where I mean the issues we see with, in the space of infant abandonment, with what women actually have access to. So what we find is that women have limited access to quality facilities in rural or underserved areas. So very often, women do not have access to or adequate access to pregnancy counseling centers. There's also a shortage of healthcare workers who have the necessary expertise in guiding women in a decision to, for example, give her baby up after giving birth in hospital. We have two examples from last year where two women, separate incidences in Johannesburg, went to clinic, gave birth in a clinic, tried to leave without their baby, informed the nursing staff, this is their decision to get the baby up, and please can I leave now that I've decided that I'm going to give the baby up for adoption, I will leave the baby here. The nursing staff insisted in both of those cases, actually cases that was handled by the Center for Child Law at the University of Victoria. In both of those instances, the nurses indicated to these women, you cannot leave without your children. We will force you to remain. We will not discharge you from the hospital until you have bonded with your baby and leave with your baby. This is unfortunately the reality of what women are facing in our hospitals. Disrespectful or abusive care deterring women from seeking services. This is not only social workers, but also hospital nurses, hospital social workers, nurses, and so on. That, the statements made to women are usually along the lines of, you made this baby, you have to take care of this baby. who rejected this child, but did it in the way of giving this baby up for adoption, choosing her life now. Imagine she decides, imagine the social workers decide to place this child in her family, where she has rejected this child, and now she comes home every day and she has to interact with the child that she's rejected, watching her parents raise this child. So obviously it's not in the best interest of the child. And then we've got economic and transport barriers, limiting access. We see that in rural areas, women are having to take taxis, 2-3 taxis to get to the nearest baby saver box, or to get to the nearest place where she can get assistance. That happens on a weekly basis where women report, I come from, I travel for an hour, I need help. Nobody has offered to help me. I have no assistance and nowhere else to turn. So the ethical tensions in child protection, we've got certain barriers like the child's best interest conflicting with parental wishes. Confidentiality must be broken to prevent harm. A child is here to consent, but refusal of treatment may endanger them. And then healthcare workers in child protection frameworks have multi-layered responsibilities. And these consist of clinical, legal, ethical, collaborative, and advocacy-focused skills. Many say that healthcare workers are on the front line, actually, to noticing that something's wrong, to being the first preventive step that could possibly be the difference between a baby being dumped out in a cell and being given up in the right way. Next. So the legal system plays a crucial role in supporting vulnerable mothers and children by protecting their rights, ensuring access to essential services, and providing mechanisms for protection, accountability, and redress. Clearly, it's the framework within which everything else can function. So we need the laws to give us the scope of what the state is supposed to do, and how this is supposed to be carried out, and where we can make improvements. Bringing us to the issue of infant abandonment. Now, this is just a snapshot of 1 month in South Africa. I just took a picture of 1 month where we gather stats and baby saver South Africa, and this should give you an idea of how frequently babies are abandoned. I just had a notification come through a few moments ago of another baby abandoned in an open cell. So this is in Johannesburg. This happens on a very frequent basis, and the story becomes more and more horrific of the situation in which these babies have been found. And as you can see on the 14th of February, for example, the burnt body of the baby was found in Ivory Park. Sometimes the baby is found where rats have eaten the baby's body. In few cases, babies are found alive, but they have severe disabilities and struggle throughout their life because of where they were lived and the situation in which they were exposed. So I took this. This happened in 2022, but it is by no means the only incident. This was an incident that happened in KZN that stands out because the mother could articulate on a note, and this note ended up on the front page of the newspaper. She could articulate the difficulties that the system had. She said in her note, "Hi, you might be wondering why I dumped my baby. Don't wonder, just help her. If you can, or call authorities, but don't judge me. I have spoken twice with social workers. They delayed to assist. I know this looks bad. I had no option. The system is fragile and we can't even abort safely anymore. Hospitals have strict rules." And this, in this case, she left the baby next to a riverbank, and she left a nappy bag, she left a note, and then unfortunately they tracked her down, police tracked her down, and arrested her, and she was charged with child abandonment. Now, the father was never located. It's fragile when an It's a box in a wall of a charitable institution, so usually it is a child and youth care center, which is a CYCC/orphanage, or it can be in the wall of temporary safe care parents or foster parents. We also get something called an approved saver, which is just a freestanding box where immediately when a baby is received, first responders like Nikkei, the police also join in, security companies also come, and then the baby is immediately escorted to hospital where the hospital social worker takes over. So the difference between a CYCC foster parent, a temporary safe care parent, and an approved saver is that a CYCC foster parent or temporary safe care parent, there is an overnight element, so the baby stays there overnight. They immediately report the baby to a social worker, and if the social worker, if it's during daytime hours when the social worker is operating, then that file is opened by the social worker immediately. The social worker immediately lodges in children's court to get that child placed in a CYCC or temporary safe care home for the foster parent. If it's after hours, then it's the next day where the child is then processed by the social worker. That is for those instances with the CYCC. Then we get a proof that there's no overnight facility. It's just a box in a wall, and the child is immediately taken to the nearest hospital. Next one, please. So there's a difference between baby saver boxes and safe haven laws, and people often get these confused. The safe haven laws refer to anonymous drop-off at fire stations, police stations, and hospitals. These are different to baby saver boxes because obviously baby saver boxes are anonymous drop-off in a box, but this is a personal handover, although it's still anonymous, but there's a personal element to it. So mothers, their faces are seen by the police officers, by hospital staff, and fire station workers. They are seen, it might be that they are deterred from using this method because their identity is known or can be made known, whereas with the baby saver box is fully anonymous. There is a camera inside the box. Once the alarm is triggered, the camera is pointed at the baby, the camera is not pointed at the mother. And that's just for our record purposes so that we know every single child is counted for and every single child is actually goes through the right process. So Baby Saver South Africa was established in 2021. We're a non-profit organization. We ourselves do not have premises and we also do not have a baby box, but we oversee 40 members who do. So some of our members have been in existence since 1999 with the baby box that they have installed. We were formed in 2021 when I completed my doctoral research on the legal regulation of infant abandonment in South Africa. And in an aim to regulate something that's unregulated, to put protocols in place for each and every organization that has these boxes, and ensure that everyone's doing the same thing, everyone's connected to a child protection organization, everyone is doing the right reporting, taking pictures of every baby that arrives, reporting it to their social worker, reporting it to DSP's canalization officers. So really just to put a template in place so that we do not have incidences of child trafficking or the like, in a system where we saw it was unrecognized and unregulated, but also in an attempt to get it legalized because we see how it saves a child's life. It saved more than 500 babies' lives since 1999, and that is a lot of babies, but if you're looking at 1999, you would expect a little bit more to some numbers, a lot more to some numbers are 3,500 babies that are abandoned unsafely every year. So what that comes down to is the fact that we we do not at the time agree our standards are located because we are falling in a legal grey area at the moment. There's no mention of us in the Children's Act of the Baby Standard device, and we have had pushback from the Department of Social Development, making it very difficult to advertise where these standards are located, which also means that in some instances a mother will abandon her infant a few hundred meters from the location of the baby standard box. And that's exactly why we think legalization would make the awareness out there, would bring the awareness to where these life-saving devices are located. So the leading causes of child abandonment, poverty, teenage pregnancy, lack of access to services, gender-based violence, and restrictive legislation. I'm just going to touch on each and every one of these. I've included the research on it that you can go read a little bit later. But with poverty, we see that in March 2023, there were 40,000 fewer grant beneficiaries under 6 years than in March 2020, when South Africa went into lockdown due to errors of exclusion. Delays in accessing the grant occurred due to a lack of identity documentation for mothers and birth registration delays for the baby. Child support grant access for infants has declined at the same time as poverty rates increased for infants. And you can just skip this one. This is the table from which that data was taken. And we'll skip that one. Thank you so much. Lack of access to services. This is something that has been widely publicized. South Africa still has severe shortfall of social workers. Around 22,000 in the public service, according to recent estimates, and this is according to the South Africa Early Childhood Review 2024, against a target of 55,000. So there is severe shortage of social workers. And we unfortunately are seeing that more and more plans are being rolled out for more and more support services, which is good. More and more ideas of how to rescue children from neglect and abuse, which is good, but without the sufficient amount of social workers, it's unfortunately not going to work. We have an incident that happened last week where a social worker was recorded and we transcribed it, saying because the baby was left at a gate as one of our neighbors. And the social worker says, basically, she doesn't know what to do. She's got no clothes or no food for this baby. If the mother wants to dump the baby in the deep of a pit, she must just do it because she doesn't know what to do with this child. And this is basically an indication of how our system is failing. This was a social worker, yes, under severe frustration and stress, because she's clearly present, but again, she has a public duty. And unfortunately, her attitude towards this child who was screaming in the voice note was, I wash my hands, I do not know what to do with this child. This mother should have just dumped the child in the deep of the pit. Next slide, please. You can also skip that one. That's taken from me. So teenage pregnancy, we all know that there's a huge problem in South Africa. And the stats that I've included there are a little bit old, but Mail and Guardian reported that South Africa is in the top 5, or is 5 times our adolescent pregnancy rate is 5 times the global high. And that is very shocking. Also, children having children from between 10 and 14 giving birth. They reported that there is a 40% decline, but the stats said they have not yet come up with how that 40% decline happened, and they suspect that the numbers might be out, but shows the shocking state of what our country is currently experiencing with teenage pregnancy. And one interesting point here was during the court hearing, all the advocacy groups the different sides, and one actually mentioned the fact that children are having children. And the responded with mothers must work and carry out their responsibilities. And to this, one of the judges said, these are children having children. So what responsibility really can we put and expect on the child having a child? And that was very interesting that the state's point of view and stance has always been make these children, regardless of their situation, regardless of their age, they need to parent these children. And that's a very narrow view according to what we are experiencing in South Africa currently. Next slide, please. Gender-based violence. This was mentioned by President as the new pandemic. And we can see as one of these issues, and baby said we always reiterate, a baby box does not solve the leading causes of abandonment. But what it does do is it prevents unsafe abandonment, while the state's duty is to solve the leading causes of abandonment. With full knowledge that all of these leading causes cannot be dealt with overnight. If you look at the extent of the issues that we are thinking about, these things will not be solved overnight. So we do need a solution to prevent unsafe abandonment while these deep issues are being dealt with. Gender-based violence is a huge problem in South Africa. And a lot of women that are abandoning their babies are victims of gender-based violence. They have either been abandoned by their partner or their lives are being threatened. Some women report to us that if I go home with this child, I'm going to be in trouble. I cannot go home with this child. The child's life is also in danger. So we know that the options that these women face or the situations that they are in is very, very it's unsafe and it's difficult to deal with by just saying it's your responsibility. We have a responsibility to act in the best interest of children. Next slide, please. And also skip this one. That's a study done gender differences in neonates. And I just want to stick here, which says abandonment accounted for 84.9% of neonaticides, and abandoned neonates were mainly termed babies. So, and the line before that says unwanted pregnancies are the most common cause of infanticide and neonaticide. Neonaticide is the killing of a baby, which is 24 hours, killing of a newborn within 24 hours or 28 days of birth, and infanticide is the killing of a child under 1 year old. So unwanted pregnancies were the most common cause of mothers killing their babies. Next slide, please. So this legislation is a big thing that we've dealt with in our court application because we feel that the Children's Act is restrictive in that it does not allow for baby saver box, but it does not also disallow for baby saver box. The only thing that it says is in Section 305, which says that abandonment is a crime. Now, if you look at it that way, it would seem that we are actually aiding and abetting that crime, and hence we have to do our court application. So currently the abandonment of children in South Africa is regulated by Section 305(3)(b) of the Children's Act, which declares it an offence to abandon a child. Further, the concealment of birth of an infant is dealt with in Section 103 of the General Law Amendment Act. The exposure of an infant is the Criminal Procedure Act, and then we've got the crime of infanticide. Now, these laws that are in place, we are definitely not saying that abandonment must be dealt with, that there should be no crime of abandonment. Absolutely not. Abandonment is abandonment and it should be a crime. However, if a mother chooses the safe option, she should be free from prosecution based on these laws. She should not be held or charged with abandonment in terms of Section 305(3)(b) should she choose a safe alternative like a baby saver box or personal handover. who have presented to Parliament for Paediatric Committee on Social Development on the amendment of the Children's Act to include provisions for safe relinquishment. Unfortunately, during that time, there was a foster care crisis, and those provisions took precedence over the ones that I was presenting. All the other provisions that weren't included were shelved, while the portfolio committee dealt with the issue of foster care. And that was unfortunate, because at that moment they could have included provisions on this which would have said that women have the option to safely relinquish their children. The other interesting thing is that these laws do not serve as a deterrent to women who are abandoned. The numbers are 3,500 babies that are abandoned unsafely every year, and that statistic is 10 years old. So we know that the numbers have risen. Section 102 of the General Law Amendment Act, just as an example, the crime of concealment of birth, it's very hard for prosecutors to find a woman guilty of concealment of birth if she placed the baby's body in a public area, like in the South. If she abandoned the baby in the South, or in a dark even a public area. So it's not really concealing. The concealment element of the crime is not met. So we see many cases being opened, but many cases never being followed up. Investigators do not continue with that. It's abandoned because they can't find the woman, they can't gather evidence, nobody saw anything. So really, it's not serving as a deterrent. So we are saying we need a law that will allow women to actually do this in a safe manner. Next slide, please. So in 2023, there was a provincial adoption workshop in Gauteng, and this workshop was entitled Illegal Baby Basket Services Offered by CYCD and Private Temporary Safety Homes. Now, this was, sorry, I'll just wrap up this within the next 5 minutes, if that's okay. Thank you. And this workshop was basically entitled Illegal Baby Baskets, and this was the first time we heard that this was regarded as illegal by the new head of CYCD and adoption. Next slide, please. And then the directive was issued that declared us illegal, and this is all the stuff that the directive was based on. You can go on to the next slide. We launched our application on the 14th of February last year, and basically against the Minister of Social Development, and you can go on to the next slide. And our application is based on right to life, right to the dignity and best interest of the child. Next slide. And then during the course of last year, we saw that the Department of Social Development actually started to make baby service illegal officially by including this in the Children's Amendment Bill, which they then withdrew afterwards. Next slide. Our court application was heard on the 5th, 6th, and 7th of May. Judgment was reserved, and basically the argument started stateside was the child has no recollection of or knowledge of their origins, and this is against the child's best interest, to which we argue that the child's right to life trumps the child's right to knowledge of origins. And you can go to the next slide. And basically, in conclusion, our baby service device is here at saving a child's life. Our service will operate. We are waiting on the judgment that was reserved, and we are, once that judgment comes out, we will definitely be reporting on that and giving everyone the necessary information. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Thank you everyone for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. Before we move on, I'd just like to extend my sincere thanks to our speakers, Dr. Omar and Professor Rosenberg. for sharing their expertise and insights this evening. Their contributions have reminded us that child protection is not a responsibility that belongs to any one profession alone. It's a collective responsibility. As future healthcare professionals, we may be the first to recognize when a child is at risk, but our actions do not exist in isolation. We hope that tonight's discussions have highlighted not only the complexity of child protection, but also the importance of advocacy, vigilance, and interdisciplinary collaboration in safeguarding vulnerable children. We will now be moving on to the second part of tonight's program, our Basic Pediatric Life Support Workshop, which will be led by Professor Dunbar. Please move to the back of the venue.
No, before they go to the back of the venue.
Okay.